Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Decloak podcast. I'm your host, Leo Cunningham, and today I am joined with David Cross, the CISO of Oracle. And yeah, no doubt this is going to be an exciting one today. I followed David's career for a while now, and really glad that we've managed to have an opportunity to catch up. And yes, thank you very much, David, for being a part of this podcast. And traditionally, we start with a brief overview of you and your career and any kind of insights and lessons that you've learned. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, Leo. Certainly, it's been great to kind of meet up through I think our virtual community, I think on Slack, the CISO Society and other things like that. And I love podcasting because I think it's a big part of, building the community and connecting. But, quick introduction to myself is I'm the CISO for the Oracle SaaS cloud because we're a very large company. I'm very focused on the SaaS cloud security. I'm also a venture partner with Rain Capital VC, so very involved with the cybersecurity startup community as well. And I've been around for a few years. You can tell from my gray hairs. Been heavily at Microsoft and Google, all cloud security, right? And a big part of it is, I think, is going to coming up is about. I think about whether myself or others is like, well, how do we grow up in this community? How do we be successful or achievements, right? It's because of the community, the people that we learn from, the people that mentor us, the people that shared with us, right? And that's one of the big things I think is exciting to kind of share and talk about in the podcast.
Excellent, and I appreciate that. And would you say you've learned a lot then? I mean, you've obviously mentioned some big companies then there. What's been the top 3 lessons you've learned at each of these companies when it comes to cyber and your journey towards being a CISO?
Certainly, and I'll start one thing. Maybe I'll start with a little controversy, right? As an element is I think you need to be hands-on, you need to be technical, right? I know for many companies it's about business or it's about audit compliance, but I think I've been mostly involved in high tech, right? So I'll kind of give it that caveat, but it's about being hands-on, being involved, right? I'll go back many, many years ago when I was at Microsoft, and one day I was just a program manager working on a security area. And I said something on a distribution list, and one of the distinguished engineers said, "David, you've never even installed that. How can you talk about it?" Right? And so I realized that you can't really be an owner, right? It's like inception, right? It's like having a child, right? You need to be there from the start, right, and be part of it, right? And that's important to know. So I think as an element, just like I did here at Oracle, 5+ years ago, is that I'm not a big fan of Java. I shouldn't say that, but I was never a Java developer. But how can I have credibility and trust in my company if I don't have my Java developer certification, right? How can I speak to that? And that's a big part of it. And I think that's something that many of the community should think about.
And would you say that's a key lesson that you've learned is gaining credibility? Because if you can't speak the same language as other people, then how can you relate? How can you then transfer or try and convey what you're trying to maybe get something fixed, patched, or scale within your program management side? So yeah, give me your thoughts on that.
Oh, absolutely. 2 parts is that one is like say that, hey, you and I speaking the same language, but you're from Scotland, so I got to get some training here. I got to get my Babelfish out here a little bit, right? So make sure we understand each other, speak the same language, right? But there's the other element is, I think you're right about the vernacular, right? Is sometimes let's talk about, audit and compliance, for example, is that can you go to a developer and saying that, hey, I need the evidence for this control? The developer's going to like, what are you talking about? Oh, you need me to perform an access check and you want to see the log for that? Oh, okay. And that's a big part of it, right? It's about speaking the vernacular and understanding so you can have a connection. Otherwise, we'll see buzzing and clicking or hear buzzing and clicking noises, when we try to speak to each other.
I love that approach. That translatable context is always missing, I think, across multiple different teams within different industries. You mentioned, obviously, I am from a different part of the world, but yet we speak a commonality. In fact, I think we may have $1 million business idea between CISOs and different, it would be like Babelfish, as you just said, translating that jargon. And that's something I think we always tend to struggle with. And, would you say, David, like one of the biggest things you've probably learned is maybe working on communication styles and skills? Obviously, we've just mentioned there, I'm from a complete different country, clearly different accent, and you're talking about, making language palatable for people to understand. So would you say that's something that you've had to develop or focus on?
Oh, absolutely. I agree 100%. So, same being technical, but like many people have known me many years in the companies that I've written. I write what's called the weekly dossier, the security dossier, and it's not public, unfortunately, but people that have known me that write about it. And a big part of it, it's about communication. So something I'm proud about is I think this goes back to 2009, right? Is when I was at Microsoft, right? There's a program, Bill Gates had was known as the Think Week, papers, right? And so he had this annual thing where people write Think Week papers, and then they choose a few each year for awards and for recognition around that. Well, in 2009, right, I won one of the top 30 papers of the year, for Think Week from Bill Gates. It's one of the things I'm most honored by. And what did I write about? So I wrote about success in distributed teams, and being successful across distributed teams involves one thing: communication, right? And I realized that, right? Because and so as you build up your technical skills, and I think that some people go up in their career, is that you also need the soft skills, you need the communication skills, you need the presentation skills. And this needs sometimes just as much training and practice and education, right, as the technical things, right? And I think many people don't realize that.
I completely agree. I mean, emotional intelligence or EQ, EI is often, it seems to be missing when it comes to, managing dispersed teams or communicating with high and low context communication styles. I've worked at a company where they were very led by instruction. It needs to be black or white rather than adding some humor, some Western humor. You and I could probably have a laugh about something where other people may be like, I'm confused, what's the meaning of this, and vice versa. So that's excellent advice, and I think a lot of people will definitely appreciate that. Moving on to challenges that you faced in the industry. Run me through some of those, because obviously you've worked at a multitude of big names. So yeah, whether that's professionally or personally, talk me through some of those challenges and how you overcame them.
I think two parts I'd like to say. First is I would say about, kind of mental fitness and physical fitness, right? Sometimes is that, we're always under stress, especially security. We love being in, the fire mode. We love being on top of things. We love the dynamics part of that, but right, you can burn out. And one of the things I've learned many years ago is an element is you always have time to take a break, right? And sometimes taking a break, to perform a physical activity, some exercise or something like that is what is amazingly will reduce the stress, right? So think about the hardest days and like, I'll say, I'll go out and say, I'm going to run a 5K, right? Saying, yep, you can take a 30-minute break, run a 5K. It's amazing no matter what's going on. You take a 5K run and things like that, the stress comes down, nothing died, the world's not over, things like that. And then you're ready to re-engage again, right? And it's the combination of that is really, really important, right? So that's when I'd love to stress with people. The second thing I always love to stress with people is that we can always work more, right? And I think the big things I try to share with my mentees is an element is it's not about the number of hours you work, right? Because you kind of reach this plateau of really just diminishing returns, but it's the amount of investment that you put into yourself, right? And so every week, right? When I go back to my days when I left the military, like 30 years ago, right? I want to get to Microsoft, but I just didn't have all the current skills to do that. So I'm going to get a different job. I'm going to go to graduate school and I'm going to work on some training, right? This is where like I mentioned soft skills or technical skills is like spend 4 hours every week investing in yourself, right? Growing your technical skills, your knowledge, the latest development language, or the latest book on how to tell stories, right? For example, of your soft skills. This is how people grow and get beyond, the burnout and just, the endless work, kind of parade.
I love that because on that second point, you're breaking the monotony. I think sometimes, burnout comes from that repetition of not being able to break out. And self-investment is something that no one has mentioned yet on the podcast. And I absolutely love that. I worked with a CTO many years ago when I worked at Fandeal. And, they were a big proponent of, having that focus time in your diary. I think, at times when people say, hey, just spend 10 hours a week on self-development. I'm like, 10 hours a week, that's crazy. I've never heard that before. But then you start to see different teams would break away. They would have visualization sessions. They would talk about OKRs. They would talk about many different things that would help people learn about other aspects of the business. Then people will go learn, I don't know, maybe some Python, and then next thing you know, in the next sprint, that person's now utilizing that skill set. And on that first point is that physical and mental fitness. I would say one of the biggest challenges I had was interviews, nerves. And I got to a process where I became so method where maybe the day before I would go, do some reconnaissance, check out the environment, just walk you're leaving the train, you're walking to the office, and then I don't know, it sounds a bit insane, but for me, it really helped with the nerves because you're prepared instead of like cramming all your notes and everything else. So, and yeah, and I think physical fitness plays a huge part in reducing stress and fatigue. And yeah, I really like that. Yeah.
Leo, I'd like to kind of share another thing is like, for many of us, like, hey, we've been out of school, other things like that. It's like, well, how do I get, I say my recommendation to everybody is 4 hours a week. Okay. So it's like 4 hours a week. How do I get that in? I'm so busy and things come in. It's like, what you have to do is kind of like you're going back to school or you're going to graduate school or things like that, is you're setting aside those 4 hours a week in your calendar, period. Nothing overrides those unless it's an emergency, family, work, whatever. It's like those times are set and you build into that rhythm and you live by that rhythm, right? So then you say, okay, that is my training rhythm. That is I'm going to read a book. I'm working on this in this area. And you got to add that structure in sometimes. Otherwise, you'll run it. I'm too busy. I don't have time, right? And so structure it just like you're going back to school. You have a commitment. And sometimes taking training is better. Like, well, why don't you take a course or why don't you go to Coursera or other ones and pay the money, right? It's like pay the money is because now you got skin in the game and you're not going to let it drop.
I love that because I think sometimes people probably take the easier route out and not commit by obviously ponying up some money. You're tied in and that's it. Is there any recommendations like do you guys have like I would imagine you would allocate that time as part of development, as part of like a kind of career move or empowerment within your career in the organization. Is that something in your team that you have built into like a playbook? So let's say, I don't know, Suzanne joins the company on Monday. Is that part of her like 30, 60, 90-day plan? I'm guessing for any managers out there who want to shoehorn that development time in, would you be able to give any advice or recommendations?
Yeah, it's a tricky one actually, but I think it's because different roles, right, are different and things like that. But part of it is really trying to understand the individual, right, and where they're at in their career and what's needed for their role, right? So one thing as a company or sorry, an organization that we have is often we have kind of training days, kind of meeting days and things like
Yeah.
that, and really strongly encouraging and using those, right, to help people to say, take a breather, right? Take a step back on that. Another element is really encouraging and really kind of say evangelizing and recognizing people like, hey, someone just finished a new course or got a certification and recognizing that, right? And there's a little bit element of the peer pressure, right? To kind of encourage people to say, well, I want to be recognized too, right? And so maybe I should do this certification. Maybe I should take this course, right? And doing it in a positive way, not to beat people up if they didn't do it, but encouraging people to feel good about when they do perform it and do get these accomplishments.
It completely makes sense. And I think through that empowerment, then it will be easier to adopt. And then other people start to see it and then it cross-pollinates. And before you know it, you have an army of people that are happy to learn and they make that time and they feel a lot better about themselves. And yeah, totally agree.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to take a couple of minutes and talk about today's sponsor, which is Vanta. Whether you're starting or scaling your company's security program, demonstrating top-notch security practices and establishing trust is more important than ever. Through my experiences of using Vanta, Vanta automates compliance. It covers everything from SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and many more, saving you time and money, while helping you build customer trust. I love all the insights that it gives me, covering everything from asset management, my control failures, audit status, even vulnerabilities from other connecting systems which have been integrated into the platform. Having a centralized place for something like an ISO program has been a godsend for me. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. Why Vanta? With over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora, they all use Vanta to manage risk and provide security in real time. So, my listeners can claim a special offer of $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/decloaked. That's vanta.com/decloaked. Thanks.
Moving on then, David, in terms of a specific topic that you want to discuss that needs relevance or clearing up within the industry, please run me through your topic, your pros and cons, and any gripes that you may have or not have. Yeah.
Oh, let's see here is, one thing that I've really kind of, I'll say two things I really love to talk about. One is really thinking about who is the customer of security, right? It comes back to my little point about being hands-on, being technical and element, right? And I'll really kind of call out is that, longtime friend, Ira Winkler, and also somebody I worked with, a long time as well, Chensi Wang, from Rain Capital, right? He's kind of said, in security, especially in high-tech companies, right, or in companies where you've got developers, who is your customer? The customer is the developer, right? An element is that you need to understand the developer, and sometimes you need to be a developer, right, to say how you make their job successful. How do you help them achieve security, right? And having that mindset. So we should never be, I know we're the police, we're the tax man, we're the auditor type of thing. It's more of like, okay, we want security. How do we make the developers successful, right? How do we make the operators successful? Understanding that, embracing them. And so that's one thing I really like to continue to push on in understanding, right? It's not a us versus them type of thing. That's one. The second thing is, like, as I've been here, certainly in the United States, right? It's a big topic, is that of there's a lot of there's shortage of people, right, in cybersecurity for many reasons, right? And we don't have a whole podcast on that itself. But so what am I trying to do in helping with that, right? Is I'm a veteran, I'm a U.S. Navy veteran, from many years ago, right? An element is that I was fortunate to get in cybersecurity, but I'm really trying to say that how we can take veterans, right, people that have had a lot of principles that are great in any organization, honesty, integrity, kind of loyalty, attention to detail, know how to follow a playbook, right? And we're saying we need people to join cybersecurity organizations. Like, you need people with these principles, right? That know how to operate under fire, right? To know how to train. They're passionate about their work. They're loyal and dedicated, right? And so that's a big win-win, right? Of helping, veterans who are leaving the service, right, and back into the civilian career. At the same time, helping us bring in people into this field where we need more people with these type of attributes.
I love that. One element on the first point about who is the customer of security or cyber, that it's almost like we're having to have a mirror image, think about them, rather than just us all the time. And I think that probably creates a lot of discord between security and maybe engineering teams, as you said, developers, and then nothing really gets done, and then it becomes a cultural issue. And I think that's a really good point, is, it's about the other people, understanding them, how we can service them and how we can support them, whether that's the capability, tools, education, and then hopefully that reduces the panic and stress around security within an organization. And the second aspect of the skills shortage, absolutely, a few people have spoken to, which will feature in later podcasts, is obviously opening up a diverse market share of individuals, veterans, absolutely, individuals that can clearly listen and act on their instructions. And things like playbooks are becoming, well, they're almost the norm in a lot of organizations, is to be able to execute a strategy based on specific events. And who better would be obviously individuals in the military who have faced high stress, high impact roles, whether that's across within cyber or not within cyber. It's still the same approach. It's still a warfare frontier. Some people don't like when I say cyber's a war frontier, but it is. So, and do you have any advice that you would give on that aspect then? Because clearly a lot of people say there's huge skills shortage. Is there anything that you would recommend to individuals that maybe, again, who are leaving the military or leaving a specific industry and want to get into cyber?
Yeah, great question. Certainly, a lot's changed in the 30 years since I joined an Element, but certainly I don't want to make say which is best or things like that. We've got LinkedIn Learning, we've got others. You got to, I'm a big fan of Coursera, right? I would say Coursera because it's kind of a lightweight. It's a good, easy, lightweight, low cost way for people to kind of get some basic skills. So if I look at myself when I left the military 30 years ago, right? And my first job was like, get in, and I was on a help desk, right? I just wanted my foot in the door. Do whatever it takes to get your foot in the door, and then you can grow with it, right? If I go 30 years later, I got 30 patents in my name, right? And so but you can learn as you go. All I say is jump in, get your foot in the door of where you want to be, right? And then investing in yourself continuously, and you can grow with it. You can get any job you want, right? It's about, hey, being dedicated, do what the right things for the company, right? And invest in yourself, and you will grow with it, right? And get to where you want to be, right? And that's the big part of it, right? But some people can say, well, that's below me, right? But like, I come back the days I wanted into Microsoft. Like, I actually started Microsoft Consulting Services. I wanted to be in a product group, but I couldn't get in, right? So I got in through Microsoft Consulting Services, got my foot in the door, proved myself, right? Never give up, right? And that's what it's all about.
I love that approach and mantra. It is true, never give up. There's so many people that probably the audience that are listening, they've either mentored someone or they know of someone younger or someone who's just maybe, I guess, just had enough. They've been in an organization for decades and they want to try something completely new. And I think for me, even if they don't take a traditional route, even things like blogs, networking, even their own repositories, if they're obviously that way inclined, or anything towards like Hack the Box or bug bounty programs, and kind of just experimenting and even creating something public, goes a long way. I've seen so many resumes where someone will literally put, hey, I've only got a CompTIA cert or ISC square, whatever, but here's all the other things I've done. And I think that really proves that and shows a lot of heart and determination. And back to your point, is like, just get your foot in the door. And I think take any advantage you can to ultimately get there. And I think that definitely helps. And yeah, I completely agree.
Leon, I'd love to thanks for bringing that one up. There's an element, as a lot of people, let's say there's battles, right? The industry to degrees, like, oh, I don't have a degree, right? I don't have a CISSP, or, name it, whatever. It's like, so how do I get in, right? And I think it's very simple, is that, all right, just prove what you can do, right? I tell people like, all right, do you want to be a pen tester, right? Write a blog, right? Where's your GitHub repository, right? Those type of things. If you can do these things, right? Have your repos, have your blog, have your white papers, have your repos, whatever it is, create that portfolio. Let's say, Leila, maybe, when you were, a few years ago, when you're trying to be a model, right? You have this portfolio, right, of all your pictures, right? And you say, check out my portfolio. Therefore, you're going to want me for this movie, right? Well, think about the same things. Like, you want to be a pen tester, you want to be a cyber analyst, right? You want to be in the SOC, right? Just document, put it on the web and show what you can do. Because then in 2 seconds, if you talk to someone that's hiring and say, just go look at my blog, just go look at my GitHub, whatever, you'll know what I can do and ask me questions. It's so easy to then prove that, oh, maybe you do have the skills. Maybe we can give you a chance on that, right? Just invest in that, right? And I think that's what makes the leap of making a connection that many others aren't doing enough.
Absolutely. And before I discuss my modeling career, that's obviously a joke, but the artifacts almost act as if a competency benchmark. How many times have we saw like, oh, we need someone with 20 years experience with Kubernetes? It's like, it's not even that old. So, things like that really go a long way by, proving that you have a skill set, or at least you're trying it. I think people forget that hiring managers will look for any advantage as well. They will look for diamonds in the rough. And there's been so many times where, you've unearthed a talent and then you just need a bit of encouragement, nurturing, and then they're going to change gear, and then you'll think to yourself, well, cost effective as well. You're putting someone on a career trajectory, and hopefully, that lasts multiple decades. But yeah, it's amazing to think that people just overlook. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll give another, tip I've shared with some others as well. So that's ultimately is like, let's say you've got a GitHub repo, you've got your blog, whatever, like you can't get anyone to take notice, right? You use LinkedIn or other things to say, hey, Leo, I will send you a $25 Starbucks coupon, right? So for if you just give me 5 minutes to kind of show you what I might be able to do, right? And it's called the art of influence, again, like books and soft skills, and so it's about how you have reciprocity, right? I could say 9 out of 10 times, if you give someone an opportunity, whether it's a coffee coupon or lunch for a 5-minute virtual session, right? People will accept it, right? Every now and then, someone's going to take it and blow you off, like, okay. But you're saying, oh, $25 or $50 lunch or something like that. That's a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
And say, but to get what? A 6-figure job, right? What's the minimum you can be paid, right? For these jobs, right? It's like you invest a little bit in just getting your foot in the door. And that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And if anyone has any comments or any trajectories or whatever, please share in the comments. And that definitely will help hopefully encourage other people. And then moving on, David, to our last segment, is the one thing in cyber you think is bullshit and needs focus or needs to change. Yeah.
The one thing that has to change, a big thing is I think about a lot is about building partnership is that it's getting better in some cases, but I've seen some of the CISO community, and I've been to like a teammate summit and others talking about it's about partnership. And we think about security end to end. It's more of like for development, operations, security working together. That what's our commitments together, right? How are we going to deal with this together, right? Let's talk about a simple example: ransomware, right? Ransomware. There's a security element to it. There's operations. There's disaster recovery element, right? And so is it all just a security playbook, right? It's like we were attacked, we need to recover. Well, isn't ops, does security own all the backups and ops and recover? No, they don't. So it's like, how do you work together, as a partnership, right? That is what has to change more and more versus it's us versus them.
I love that. And I think too often we forget security cannot be achieved in an organization without the help of others. It's impossible. I've seen it many times with many different people that I know that have either went and done an ISO cert on their own. It's like, this is absolute suicide, so it's invaluable information. I think you need to unify where you can. You need to be able to show proof of value around security. And ultimately, what can you do for other people to help them move forward? Because if you scratch their back, the likelihood is they'll do the same effectively down the line. So, yeah, is there any other topics you would like to discuss on that vein?
I think there's another element is I think of which we talked on something about the community is like the CISO community, the security community is being a community, right? Is there's an element, does every company have threat intelligence, feeds? Does every company has threat intelligence experts? Does everybody, have the ability to digest everything and know what's going on? I think really what we're trying to do, and I think what we need more and more is the common defense and shared community, right? An element. I think when we saw some things like Log4j, we saw a little bit when the CZ, thing was kind of popping up a little bit. It's more of like, hey, here's what we found, right? Here's what we used to discover it. Here's what we're using to kind of scan for it, right? And building this community, right? I think is more and more important because we all not every company is going to have all the experts, all the expertise, right? And how do we share things easily, freely, right? In not a competitive way, but against the common enemy.
Absolutely agree. And I think when one person's impacted, we're all impacted. And I think a lot of people probably forget that in security. But I guess everyone will be on their own journey and path to discovery. So, but yes. That's us concluded, David. Thank you so much for your time. No doubt we'll probably catch up in Slack later on. And then, yeah, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in for another episode of Decloak Podcast. Please like and subscribe. And yeah, goodbye.